Dr. Jiwoo stood at the viewport of the International Space Station in 2089, watching as the last evacuation ships departed Earth's atmosphere. She pressed her palm against the thick glass, tracing the outline of the blue planet below. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. There was no time for sentiment now. Humanity had known this day was coming for decades. The climate crisis had accelerated beyond their most pessimistic models. Massive flooding had swallowed coastal cities whole. Wildfires raged across continents. The air in major cities had become nearly unbreathable without filtration masks. What began as an experimental colony on Mars 30 years ago had transformed into humanity's only hope for survival. Recording final Earth orbit log, Jiwoo spoke into her wrist communicator. Her voice echoed in the empty observation deck. May 15, 2089. The last evacuation vessel, Hope's Horizon, has just cleared the atmosphere with 5,000 passengers. This completes the Mars Transfer Initiative. Total human population remaining on Earth, 0. She paused, watching as the tiny speck of the ship grew smaller against the blackness of space. The atmospheric restoration drones are functioning at 98% capacity. Preliminary models suggest Earth may become habitable again in 70 years. If all systems continue operating as designed. Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned to see Hyun Ki, the station's chief engineer. "It's time, Jiwoo," he said quietly. "Our shuttle leaves in 20 minutes. She nodded, but didn't move. "My parents are buried in Korea. My brother's family is in stasis aboard the Pioneer. And here I am, the last human to see Earth from orbit." Hyun Ki stood beside her, his weathered face reflecting in the glass. "My grandmother refused to leave. Her farm said she'd rather die on Earth than live on Mars." His voice cracked slightly. The evacuation team found her sitting on her porch, already gone. Jiwoo touched his shoulder. "I'm sorry. We all lost something. Everyone." He gestured toward the planet below. "But we're doing what humans have always done. We adapt. We survive." Jiwoo picked up her small bag of personal belongings. Inside was a cloth pouch containing soil from her childhood home, a handful of seeds from Earth's plants, and printed photos of her family. The physical items were precious now, pieces of a world they were leaving behind. "The Mars colonies aren't ready for this many people," she said. 9 billion humans, Hyun Ki. They expected another decade to prepare. The construction crews have been working around the clock. The new biodomes in Arcadia Planitia will house another billion. It won't be comfortable, but it will be possible. As they walked toward the shuttle bay, emergency lighting cast long shadows in the corridors. Most systems had already been shut, down to conserve power for the drones working on Earth. The station would continue to orbit, serving as a relay for the drone network, but without human occupants. Jiwoo had been part of the team that programmed the restoration drones. Millions of machines, from microscopic soil remediation bots to massive atmospheric processors. Their only purpose, to heal Earth enough for human return. The project had cost trillions and employed the brightest minds on the planet. It was humanity's apology letter to the world they had damaged and their promise to return. "Do you think it will work?" Hyun Ki asked as they stepped into the airlock chamber. Jiwoo secured her bag. "The simulations say yes. The drones will clean the air, plant the forests, restore the oceans, but so much could go wrong. A solar flare could fry their circuits. A programming error could cascade. Earth's systems might be too far gone. And, if they fail?" She looked at him directly. "Then Mars becomes our permanent home. Our children will only know Earth from stories and videos. We become a different species, adapted to life under domes and reduced gravity." The airlock hissed as it sealed shut. Through a small window, Jiwoo took one last look at the station that had been her home for the past 5 years. Soon they would board the last shuttle and join the Mars fleet already in transit. "My daughter was born on Mars," Hyun Ki said unexpectedly. "She's 4 now. She's never felt rain, never seen an ocean, never stood under an open sky." Jiwoo nodded. "The next generation will be different. They won't miss Earth the way we do. They'll learn about oceans and forests like we learned about dinosaurs, things that once existed but are no longer part of their world. The shuttle's engines hummed to life as they strapped themselves in. 3 other crew members sat silently, each lost in their own thoughts. This wasn't just a journey to Mars, it was the end of humanity's time on Earth, at least for the foreseeable future. As the shuttle detached from the station, Ji-Woo watched Earth grow smaller through the reinforced window. The blue marble that had given birth to their species now temporarily uninhabitable for human life. Yet life would continue there. The hardier species would adapt, evolve, perhaps thrive in humanity's absence. "The return will happen," she whispered, making it a promise to herself. "Not in my lifetime, maybe not in my daughter's. But someday, humans will walk on Earth again." The shuttle accelerated, joining the last evacuation fleet heading toward their temporary home among the stars. Behind them, Earth continued its patient rotation, a wounded planet beginning its long process of healing. By 2140, 51 years after the evacuation, the 4th generation of Earth evacuees had been born on Mars. Young Tae-ho had just turned 16 and had never seen Earth except in historical recordings and virtual reality simulations. Life on Mars was all he knew. Tae-ho woke to the familiar soft beep of his room's light system, gradually brightening to simulate sunrise. His small living pod, just 4 meters square, contained everything he needed: a fold-down bed, a compact desk, and a wall screen that could display whatever environment he chose. Today, it showed a forest from old Earth, trees swaying in a breeze he would never feel. "Morning, Tae-ho," his mother called through the thin wall that separated their pods. "Water ration begins in 10 minutes. Water. Everything on Mars revolved around water. Each person received exactly 20 liters per day for drinking, washing, and contributing to the community garden. Not a drop could be wasted. Tae-ho had heard stories about Earth, where water sometimes fell from the sky in such abundance that people complained about it. The concept seemed almost magical to him. He quickly dressed in his standard-issue jumpsuit, made from fibers grown in the agricultural dome, and headed to the communal washing area. The hallways of Habitat Zone 12 were already busy with people starting their day. 9 billion humans now lived on Mars, spread across massive interconnected biodomes that stretched across Arcadia Planitia, Utopia Planitia, and several other regions. Their home was a marvel of engineering, yet everyone lived with the knowledge that they existed inside fragile bubbles on a hostile planet. "Hey, dreamer," called out his friend Sunmi, falling into step beside him. "Ready for school?" Tae-ho nodded. "We're starting Earth history today." Sunmi rolled her eyes. "Why do they make us study so much about a planet we'll never see? It's weird learning about oceans when the most water we ever see is in the central reservoir." "The Mars Council says we need to remember where we came from," Tae-ho replied, repeating what all children were taught. "We're not Martians. We're Earth humans living on Mars." They joined the line for morning water rations. Each person held out their personal container as a technician carefully measured the exact allocation. Some older people still struggled with the concept of limited water, but for Tae-ho's generation, careful conservation was as natural as breathing, the recycled air. After collecting his water, Tae-ho headed to the education dome with Sunmi. Unlike the cramped living quarters, the education dome was spacious, designed to accommodate hundreds of students. The ceiling was a massive screen displaying a simulated sky, currently a perfect blue with wispy clouds, apparently how Earth's sky had often looked. "Today we're going to discuss what Earth was like before the climate crisis," their teacher, Mr. Yoon, announced. He was one of the few teachers old enough to have actually been born on Earth, though he'd been just a child during the evacuation. The wall screen activated, showing images of vast blue oceans, green forests, and bustling cities. Tae-ho leaned forward, fascinated as always by these glimpses of their ancestral home. "Can anyone tell me what this is?" Mr. Yoon asked, pointing to an image of people sitting on brown ground, with blue water stretching before them. A girl in the front raised her hand. That's a beach where the land meets the ocean. Correct, Jinnah? And what are these people doing? The class stared at the image in confusion until Taeho spoke up. They're just sitting there, on the ground, without environment suits? Mr. Yoon smiled sadly. They're relaxing, enjoying the sunshine and the water. This was called going to the beach, and it was something people did for pleasure. The concept of sitting outdoors for enjoyment was foreign to them. On Mars, any time outside the habitats required a pressure suit and was strictly for necessary work. The harsh radiation and thin atmosphere made the Martian surface lethal. After school, Taeho had his work shift at the hydroponic gardens. Everyone on Mars contributed to the survival of the colony. Children began with simple tasks at age 12, then moved to more important roles as they grew older. The gardens were Taeho's favorite place in the whole colony. Rows upon rows of plants grew under specialized lights, their roots suspended in nutrient-rich water instead of soil. The air here was noticeably fresher, filled with the oxygen produced by thousands of plants. "You're with me today," said Garden Supervisor Hee Young. "We're checking tomato growth rates." As they worked, carefully measuring and recording the size of each tomato, Taeho gathered his courage to ask a question. "Is it true you've seen the monitoring data from Earth?" Hee Young looked surprised. "Where did you hear that?" "My father says the garden supervisors get to see the drone reports because you need to know about Earth plants." After a moment's hesitation, Hee Young nodded. "We do receive some of the data. The atmospheric drones send regular updates." "Is Earth getting better?" Taeho asked eagerly. "Will we really go back someday?" Hee Young carefully placed her tablet down. "The official reports say the restoration is proceeding as planned. Oxygen levels are improving. Some areas show significant forest regrowth. But Mars has been our home for over 50 years now. Many people, especially those born here, question whether we should return at all." This was something Taeho had heard whispered about but never discussed openly. The Mars-born versus the Earth-born. Those who saw Mars as a temporary shelter versus those who saw it as home. That evening, as his family gathered in their shared common space for dinner, a nutrient-dense paste flavored to mimic traditional Korean dishes, Taeho's grandfather shared stories about Earth, as he often did. "The sound of rain on a roof," the old man said wistfully. "The smell of the ocean, the feeling of wind on your face. These are things I wish you could know, Taeho." "The Mars Council meeting is starting," Taeho's father interrupted, turning up the volume on their small screen. The announcer's voice filled their small living space. "Today the Council will address recent findings from the Earth Monitoring Station. Preliminary readings suggest atmospheric improvement has exceeded projections in certain regions." Taeho's grandfather gripped the table with trembling hands. "It's happening. Earth is healing." Taeho stared at the screen, at the graphs and charts. That meant little to him. But he understood the rising excitement in the room. For the first time in his life, the idea of Earth became more than just stories and simulations. That night, as artificial lights dimmed to simulate nighttime throughout the colony, Taeho pulled up Earth images on his personal screen. He stared at photos of open skies, endless oceans, and towering mountains. A world without domes or airlocks or water rations. A world that was both his heritage and a complete mystery. "I will see you someday," he whispered to the image of Earth glowing on his screen. "I promise." In 2159, preliminary readings suggested Earth's atmosphere had stabilized enough to support a brief human expedition. Yoon-ji, an environmental assessment specialist, felt her heart racing as she stood before the Mars Council, 12 stern faces watching her from their raised platform. "Dr. Yoon-ji, you understand the gravity of what you're proposing?" asked Counselor Dong-hyun, his voice echoing, in the large chamber. "No human has set foot on Earth in 70 years. She nodded, keeping her voice steady despite her nerves. "The drone data is clear. Oxygen levels have stabilized at 19.8%. Carbon dioxide has dropped to pre-crisis levels. The radiation shields deployed in the upper atmosphere are functioning at 94% efficiency. Earth is ready for preliminary human assessment." The chamber erupted in murmurs. For 3 generations, Mars had been humanity's only home. Earth existed in stories and educational programs, in the dreams of the elderly who still remembered blue skies and open water. "How many people would this expedition require?" asked another counselor. 12 specialists, Yunji replied. "Environmental, scientists, medical experts, and engineers. We would need 2 weeks on the surface to collect samples and verify the drone data." The debate lasted for hours, but eventually, the council voted. The mission was approved. 3 months later, Yunji stood in the launch bay of the Mars spaceport, staring at the gleaming shuttle that would carry them back to humanity's birthplace. Around her, 11 other specialists checked equipment and said goodbyes to family members. "Nervous?" asked Gi-hun, the team's medical officer, as he adjusted his flight suit. "Terrified," Yunji admitted. "What if the drones were wrong? What if Earth isn't ready?" "That's why we're going," he said simply. "To find out." The launch was broadcast throughout every habitat on Mars. 9 billion people watched as the small assessment team left the red planet behind. The journey would take 42 days, a remarkable improvement over the 8 months required during the evacuation, thanks to advancements in propulsion technology. During transit, the team studied endless data collected by Earth's restoration drones. The machines had worked tirelessly for decades, planting forests, purifying water, and removing the toxic remnants of human civilization. "Look at these readings from the Amazon basin," said Junseo, pointing to his screen during one of their daily briefings. "Forest coverage has expanded by 43% since we left. The drones replanted native species, and they've thrived without human interference." "What about the cities?" asked Yunji. Minji, the urban assessment specialist, pulled up different images. "Most concrete structures have significantly degraded. The restoration drones were programmed to preserve some historical sites, but otherwise allowed nature to reclaim urban areas." As they approached Earth, the excitement on the small vessel was palpable. None of them had seen Earth except in recordings. Even Yunji, the oldest at 42, had been born on Mars 15 years after the evacuation. "Entry trajectory calculated," announced Dae-jung from the pilot's seat. "Preparing for atmospheric descent." Yunji strapped herself in, watching through the viewport as the blue planet grew larger. This moment had featured in her dreams since childhood, the return to Earth. Her parents had told her stories about trees taller than any Mars habitat, about rain falling from the sky, about oceans so vast you couldn't see the other side. Dyke. Shuttle shook as it entered Earth's atmosphere, friction heating the external shields to thousands of degrees. Then they broke through the cloud layer and a collective gasp filled the cabin. Below them stretched a landscape both familiar from images, yet utterly foreign in its openness. Vast green forests, the glittering blue of ocean, and curiously the ruins of cities, now half reclaimed by nature. They landed in what had once been Central Park in New York City. The landing zone had been cleared by drones in preparation for their arrival, but beyond the small concrete pad, the park had become a dense forest. Trees pushed up through former walkways. Vines crawled over the remnants of nearby buildings. Yunji was the first to step outside, after sensors confirmed the air was safe to breathe. She hesitated at the airlock, then removed her helmet. The first breath of Earth's air made her dizzy, not from toxins but from its richness. On Mars, air was recycled, filtered, precisely maintained at optimal oxygen levels. This air was different. It smelled of plants, of soil, of things growing and decaying in natural cycles. It's safe," she called back to the others, her voice breaking with emotion. "We can breathe." One by one, the team emerged from the shuttle. Some fell to their knees, overcome by the sensation of standing on Earth. Others wept openly. Gi-hun laughed as he spread his arms wide, turning in a circle. "Look up," whispered Junseo. Above them stretched a blue sky, not a projection on a dome, but an actual sky that continued forever. White clouds drifted lazily across it, and most shocking of all was the warm sensation on their skin. "Sunlight," said Yunji, tilting her face upward. Real, unfiltered sunlight. The team had planned a methodical assessment: soil samples, air, quality tests, radiation readings. But for those first few moments, they simply stood in wonder, experiencing what no human had for 7 decades. Their 2-week mission stretched to 6 months as they documented a planet healing itself. They traveled to different regions, confirming the drone data and collecting new samples. They found ecosystems flourishing, wildlife populations booming, and a planet that seemed to have welcomed the absence of human interference. In the ruins of Paris, they found the Eiffel Tower still standing, carefully preserved by maintenance drones, but surrounded by a forest where streets had once been. In the former Beijing, trees grew through the roofs of buildings. The Great Wall of China remained, but was now covered in flowering vines. Wildlife had recovered beyond their wildest expectations. Herds of elephants roamed freely across African savannas. Whales breached in oceans that had been given time to recover from overfishing. Birds filled the skies in numbers not seen for centuries. "It's like Earth used our absence to heal itself," Yunji said during their final night on the planet. The team sat around a campfire, something impossible on oxygen-controlled Mars. Above them, stars shone with a clarity lost during humanity's industrial age. "Can we really come back?" asked Gi-hun quietly. "Should we?" Yunji stared into the flames. "We have to. Not as conquerors this time, not as owners, but as caretakers." She looked around at her team. "Mars saved our species, but Earth is still our home." As their shuttle lifted off for the return journey, Yunji pressed her hand against the viewport, watching Earth grow smaller. But unlike when humanity had left in fear and desperation, she departed with a promise. "We'll be back," she whispered, "and this time we'll do better." Following Yunji's groundbreaking assessment, the Mars Council chambers erupted in chaos. The detailed reports and stunning visuals her team brought back sparked fierce debates that echoed through every dome and habitat on the Red Planet. For the first time in generations, returning to Earth wasn't just a distant hope. It was a real possibility. Tae-ho, now 45 and the newly appointed director of the Repatriation Planning Committee, stood before the restless crowd in Habitat, Zone 7's main assembly area. Screens around the dome displayed his face as his words were broadcast to all 9 billion humans spread across Mars. "The Council has voted," he announced, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "We will begin preparations for a phased return to Earth." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Some people cheered and embraced, tears streaming down their faces. Others sat in stunned silence. And some shouted in protest. "Mars is our home now," a woman yelled from the crowd. "Our children were born here. Our parents died here. Why should we leave?" Tae-ho raised his hands, calling for calm. "No one will be forced to return. This will be a voluntary process, beginning with a small settlement of 500 people. If successful, more will follow." In the weeks that followed, Tae-ho barely slept. The logistical challenge before him was staggering, coordinating the return of billions of people to a planet most had never seen. Each night, he fell into bed exhausted, only to wake hours later with new problems spinning through his mind. "You need to rest," his wife Soo-jin told him one night, finding him hunched over holographic plans in their small living pod. "You can't save humanity if you collapse." He rubbed his tired eyes. "How do you prepare people for gravity they've never felt? For weather they've never experienced? For plants and animals they've only seen in simulations?" She sat beside him, looking at the plans for Earth's first new settlement, the same way humans have always done difficult things, one step at a time. The training facility took over an entire habitat dome. Engineers had created Earth simulation rooms where volunteers could experience approximations of Earth conditions. In the gravity chamber, powerful magnetic fields created the pull of Earth's stronger gravity, a force that many Mars-born humans had never felt. Tae-ho watched through the observation window as the first group of volunteers stumbled and fell. In the chamber, their muscles unprepared for the increased strain. Many vomited from the disorientation. Some cried in frustration. But day after day, they returned, slowly building strength and adaptation. "How long will the physical training take?" asked Counselor Young Mai during an inspection tour. 6 months minimum, replied the medical director. Mars-born humans have less bone density and muscle mass. Without proper preparation, Earth's gravity could break their bones, damage their organs. In another section of the facility, the weather chamber recreated Earth's climatic conditions. Rain fell from overhead sprinklers as wind machines created gusts that knocked people off their feet. Lightning and thunder simulations made children scream in terror and adults flinch. "They need to understand that on Earth the environment isn't controlled," Tejo explained to his staff. "Weather happens without warning. They need to be prepared." The wildlife preparation program proved particularly challenging. Many Mars residents had never seen an animal larger than the lab-grown protein cultures and insects used for protein farming. The idea of sharing space with autonomous creatures frightened many. "This is a dog," explained the zoology instructor, as a holographic canine bounded around the room. They were human companions on Earth. They're friendly but unpredictable. A woman raised her hand. "Will these animals attack us?" "Most Earth animals avoid humans," the instructor explained patiently. "But yes, some can be dangerous if threatened. That's why we're training you to recognize which ones to avoid." Beyond physical preparation, the psychological aspects proved even more complex. How do you prepare people for open skies after generations under protective domes? How do you explain the concept of horizon to someone who has never seen farther than a habitat wall? Tejo established support groups, led by the few elderly who still remembered Earth. These memory keepers shared their experiences, helping to build mental bridges between Mars life and Earth expectations. "On Earth you can walk for days without reaching a wall," explained one elderly man to a wide-eyed group. "The sky goes on forever. You might feel exposed, afraid at first. That's normal." Meanwhile, the engineering challenges were equally daunting. The fleet of evacuation ships had been maintained for decades in Mars orbit, but many needed extensive repairs. New landing vessels had to be designed for Earth's atmosphere. Construction drones were dispatched to Earth to prepare the first settlement site. After careful consideration, New Zealand had been chosen for the initial colony, an area with stable climate patterns, abundant resources, and minimal industrial contamination from the pre-Exodus era. The drones worked tirelessly, clearing land and constructing basic infrastructure while preserving the natural environment as much as possible. "We're not rebuilding cities," Tejo insisted during planning meetings. "We're creating settlements that work with Earth systems, not against them." The selection process for the first 500 colonists sparked controversy throughout Mars society. Hundreds of thousands volunteered, each believing they had the skills or right to be among the first to return. "We need a balanced community," Tejo explained to his committee. "Engineers, doctors, farmers, teachers, people with the psychological stability to handle extreme change and the flexibility to adapt when things inevitably go wrong." They selected a diverse group, people from different habitats, different age groups, different specialties. Some were Earth-born elderly who wished to feel their home planet beneath their feet one last time. Others were young couples who wanted their future children to know real sunshine and uncycled air. Yunji, now an advisor to the committee, reviewed the final list. "We've chosen well," she told Tejo, "but no amount of training can fully prepare them." "I know," he admitted, "but they're human. Adaptability is our greatest strength." As the launch date approached, Tejo faced an unexpected personal challenge. His daughter Hana, a brilliant environmental engineer, had been selected for the first group. "You don't have to go," he told her as they shared a meal in their family pod. "You could wait for the second wave when we know it's safe." Hana shook her head, her determination clear. "All my life I've studied Earth's ecosystems, from afar. How can I not go when I finally have the chance to see them, to help rebuild our relationship with our home planet?" He couldn't argue. Her passion for Earth had been evident since childhood, when she would spend hours in the virtual reality Earth simulators, insisting on exploring every ecosystem, every landscape. The night before the launch, Tejo stood in the observation bubble of the main habitat, looking out at the barren red landscape of Mars. This harsh world had saved humanity, offered refuge when Earth could not sustain them. For generations born on Mars, it was the only home they had ever known. "We're not abandoning you," he whispered to the planet that had sheltered them. "Some of us will always remain here, a second branch of humanity among the stars." As dawn broke, on launch day, the artificial light cycle gradually brightening in the habitats, Tae-ho felt the weight of history pressing down on him. 70 years after fleeing Earth, humans were returning, not as desperate refugees but as hopeful pioneers. They carried with them the lessons of Mars: efficiency, conservation, and respect for the delicate balance that makes life possible. "We're ready," he told the gathered crowd as the first colonists boarded their vessel. Not just to return, but to belong to Earth again, this time as proper caretakers. On April 22, 2172, Earth Day, the first permanent repatriation shuttle broke through the cloud layer above New Zealand. Inside, 500 colonists pressed against viewports, some weeping openly at the sight of blue oceans and green landscapes spread below them. Among them was Hana, who gripped her seat as the vessel descended, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Final approach," announced the pilot, her voice tense with concentration. "Everyone secure for landing." The landing site came into view, a flat clearing surrounded by rolling hills and forests. Small structures gleamed in the morning sunlight, constructed over the past year by automated drones. This would be their new home, the first human settlement on Earth in over 8 decades. Hana closed her eyes as the shuttle touched down with a gentle thud. The engines powered down, and for a moment, complete silence filled the cabin. Then the environmental sensors beeped, confirming what they all hoped to hear. The outside air was clean, the radiation levels normal, the temperature a pleasant 18 degrees Celsius. "Welcome home," said the expedition leader, her voice breaking. "Welcome to Earth." As the main door hissed open, no one moved. After years of preparation, months of travel, the moment had arrived, and suddenly everyone seemed afraid to take that final step. Hana found herself moving forward, drawn by something she couldn't explain. As the chief environmental engineer, she had studied every report, every scan, every measurement of this place. But data couldn't prepare her for reality. She stepped onto the ramp and was immediately struck by the smell. Rich, complex, alive in a way that Mars carefully filtered. Air never was. The sound came next. A constant symphony of rustling leaves, distant water, and what she recognized from training as birdsong. And then the sensation of air moving against her skin. Natural wind, unpredictable and wonderful. When her boots touched actual soil, she fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the sensation of standing on an open planet with no dome above her head. Her fingers dug into the ground, feeling the cool dirt, the tiny living things moving within it. "It's alive," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Everything is so alive." Others followed, each experiencing their own moment of connection with their ancestral home. Some laughed, some prayed, some simply stood in stunned silence, staring at the open sky above. An elderly man who had been just a child during the evacuation dropped to his knees beside Hana. "I never thought I would feel this again," he said, his voice shaking. "The earth beneath my feet, the wind, the sun without filters." He looked at her with tears in his eyes. "You young ones don't understand what was lost, what has been found again." The first weeks tested them in ways no simulation could replicate. Despite their training, many colonists struggled with Earth's stronger gravity. Muscles ached. Simple tasks exhausted them. Several suffered fractures when they misjudged the weight of objects or their own strength. The weather proved even more challenging. The first rainfall sent people running for shelter in panic, convinced the water must be toxic. The first thunderstorm caused a colony-wide lockdown, with many huddled in their homes, terrified by the booming sounds and flashes of light. "We need to adjust the training programs," Hana told her father during their weekly video call to Mars. "The simulations don't capture the unpredictability, the raw power of nature." Tae-ho nodded on the screen. How are you adapting? She smiled. I go walking every morning, a little farther each day. Yesterday I found a stream. I sat and watched the water for hours, just watching it move on its own, going wherever gravity takes it. No pumps, no recycling tanks. What surprised Hana most was how quickly the children adapted. Within days, the colony's few kids were running barefoot through grass, climbing trees, splashing in streams, things that would have been strictly forbidden in the controlled environments of Mars. They showed no fear of open spaces, embraced the changing weather, delighted in discovering insects and small animals. They belong here, observed the colony's doctor. Their bodies are already changing, vitamin D levels improving, bone density increasing, immune systems responding to Earth's microbiome. The colony grew, not outward as they had planned, but upward. Taking lessons from Mars' efficient use of space, they built compact structures that minimized their footprint on the land. Solar collectors and wind turbines provided power. Advanced water recycling systems perfected on Mars ensured not a drop was wasted. After 3 months, the colony welcomed its first Earth-born child, a healthy baby girl whose birth was celebrated throughout the settlement and broadcast to Mars. Her parents named her Terra, the ancient word for Earth. She will never know Mars, Hana told the community gathered for the naming ceremony. Never live under domes or wonder about the world her ancestors left behind. For her, this is simply home. As summer turned to autumn, the colonists experienced their first seasonal change, a concept familiar from education but startling in reality. Trees turned brilliant colors and shed their leaves. Temperatures cooled, days shortened. The rhythms of Earth asserted themselves, reminding humans that here, nature set the terms. We're not controlling this environment, Hana reminded the council during a planning meeting. We're participating in it. We need to coordinate with Earth systems, not try to override them as we did before the Exodus. The most profound moments came in encounters with wildlife. When a curious deer wandered into the settlement one morning, activities stopped as colonists gathered at a respectful distance, watching in wonder. The animal paused, regarded them with large, liquid eyes, then bounded away into the forest. Did you see how it moved? Asked one young engineer. So free, so perfect. 6 months after landing, as the colony prepared for its first winter, the second shuttle arrived with 500 more colonists. They emerged wide-eyed and uncertain, just as the first group had been. But now the original settlers stood waiting with confidence, ready to guide their fellows through the adjustment. It gets easier, Hana told a trembling woman who couldn't stop staring at the open sky. Your brain will learn that the vastness is not a threat. Your body will remember that this is where it was meant to be. On the 1-year anniversary of the landing, the colony held a ceremony at sunrise. 1,000 humans stood on a hillside, watching light spill across a landscape their ancestors had abandoned, now welcoming them back. Hana had been asked to speak. As she looked out at the faces, some weathered from a year of Earth living, others still pale from life on Mars, she felt the weight of the moment. We left as refugees, she said, her voice carrying in the clear morning air. We return as caretakers. Mars taught us what happens when humans must live within strict boundaries, conserving every resource, aware of every impact. We bring that knowledge back to Earth. She gestured to the land spreading around them, forests and meadows reclaimed from what had once been a sprawling city. Earth healed without us. Now we must learn to live here without breaking what has been mended. Our ancestors saw Earth as something to use. We must see it as something to belong to. In orbit above them, the Mars transit fleet prepared for its next journey, bringing another 1,000 colonists. On Mars, millions more watched the ceremony via transmission, some eager for their turn to return, others content to remain on the red planet that had become a second home for humanity. Hana looked up at the fading stars, knowing her father watched from one of those distant points of light. We are Earth's children, she said. Coming home changed, coming home wiser, coming home at last. As the sun cleared the horizon, bathing them all in golden light, Birds began to sing in the nearby trees, a perfect welcoming chorus for humanity's new beginning.